Picture this. It's a quiet night, the road stretching before you silent, desolate. Your car glides along the asphalt, the hum of the engine the only sound breaking the night's stillness. You're alone, or at least you think you are. The road feels endless. A ribbon of pavement cutting through dense shadows, where the only light is the faint glow of your headlights. There's an unease in the air, a heaviness that creeps in slowly, like the mist forming across the road in ghostly wisps. Then, you notice a figure, just at the edge of your vision, something or someone barely visible on the side of the road. Your heart skips, but as quickly as it appeared, it's gone, swallowed by the darkness. You grip the wheel a bit tighter, convincing yourself it was just a trick of the light, an illusion conjured by tired eyes. You shake it off and continue driving. But minutes later, another shadow flickers, closer this time. You squint, trying to make out any detail, but there's nothing, just shadows stretching further into the dark. You try to reason with yourself, laugh it off, maybe even turn up the radio to drown out the silence. But every mile feels longer than the last, and every turn, every bend, feels like it's leading you deeper into something unexplainable. Then, as you round another bend, something even stranger happens. The road, which seems so straight and clear, suddenly feels unfamiliar. The trees look different, twisted somehow, their branches reaching down toward the asphalt like long, gnarled fingers. And that's when you realize. The air itself has changed. It's colder now, thick, and every instinct in you starts screaming to turn back, to leave. But there's nowhere to go. You're alone, on a highway that thousands have traveled, yet some never seem to leave. Tonight you're on the cursed highway, a place whispered about in town and warned against in stories, where people enter and simply disappear. And the question that haunts you now is, will you be next? This highway, stretching for miles through desolate country, bordered by dense woods and shadowed by twisted, ancient trees, seems ordinary at first glance. It's a narrow road that winds through an unassuming region, a place where towns are few and far between, and streetlights are a rare sight. By day, it's just another stretch of cracked asphalt, but by night it's different, unforgiving. Cloaked in thick fog and unnervingly silent, it transforms into something otherworldly, almost alive. Travelers have reported an unsettling stillness, as if the trees themselves are watching. The locals call it the road of no return. For decades, stories of strange occurrences have circulated around this very highway. Folks who grew up nearby learned early to avoid it at night, to take the longer route, no matter the inconvenience. They'll tell you of the sudden feeling of being observed, of headlights that seem to appear and vanish in the rearview mirror, of shadows that don't match anything on the road. And more chilling still are the disappearances. Every few years, like clockwork, a car, a truck, a family of travelers, or a lone driver is reported missing, and the local papers carry the same story. The vehicle is found abandoned, engine running, headlights on, doors wide open, but no one inside. No signs of struggle, no clues, just an eerie silence hanging in the air where life should be. One of the earliest cases was in the 1950s, a young couple on their honeymoon, driving late at night along this stretch of road. The man's last phone call to his parents was calm and uneventful. He told them they'd arrive soon. But they never did. The next morning, their car was found with their belongings still inside, even the luggage untouched. But they were gone, nothing disturbed, as if they had simply vanished into thin air. For weeks, authorities searched, and locals whispered about the curse of the road, but there was nothing, no trace, no answers. As the years went by, the disappearances became a part of local folklore. Everyone knew of someone, a friend, a relative, a classmate who'd been lost to the road. Some whispered that the road took people as an offering, that it claimed travelers as its own. Others speculated it was haunted by lost souls seeking company. And then, there were those who swore they had seen them, the missing, wandering along the edges of the forest, just out of sight, eyes empty, faces expressionless, as if bound to the road forever. Old photos and newspaper clippings tell of the few who saw something in those moments before disappearing. One report mentions a truck driver who called his dispatcher late one night, voice shaking. He claimed to have seen a figure in the middle of the road, just standing there, blocking his path. He described the figure as tall, its face obscured in the shadows, unmoving, even as he slowed the truck. The call ended abruptly, and the driver was never seen again. His truck was found with the engine still running, its headlights piercing the fog, but the road was empty, That same dispatcher still recounts the terror in the driver's voice, a voice that haunts him to this day. Locals say there's a rule about driving down this highway at night: never stop. No matter what you see, no matter what you hear, keep going. They say that if you stop, if you hesitate, the road has a way of keeping you. Some drivers say they've heard whispers seeping through their radio, voices muttering their names, calling them to pull over. Others report strange figures that dart across the road only to vanish, flickers of pale faces that disappear when they look back. So what is it about this stretch of asphalt? Why do people vanish here, and why do the disappearances continue? Some say it's a doorway, a place where our world and another overlap, a space where reality becomes thin. Others speak of ancient grounds, cursed land, a place marked by something far older than the road itself, something that demands sacrifices. A dark secret buried beneath the road's surface, hidden by layers of concrete and decades of fear. As night falls and the fog rolls in, the air grows thick and cold, carrying an unmistakable feeling that this place, this cursed highway, is more than just a road. It's a place where reality warps, where time bends, and where those who pass through risk never finding their way back. The road of no return, they call it, and every few years, it lives up to its name, swallowing yet another soul without a trace. Long before it became known as the Cursed Highway, there was a road here, winding its way through the wilderness. It was narrow, uneven, not yet fully paved, a dirt path cutting through the dense forest that surrounded it like a cloak. Locals used it for years. But something changed one summer night in 1932. This was the first time anyone went missing, leaving only chilling questions behind a mystery that would haunt the small town for generations. Our story begins with 22-year-old Samuel Wallace, a quiet man from a nearby village who had recently returned from the city after graduating. Samuel was known for his adventurous spirit, someone who was always drawn to the thrill of the unknown. That summer, he took a job with the forestry department, traveling often along the winding back roads, familiarizing himself with every tree and bend. On the night of June 13th, Samuel was last seen at a local diner, sipping coffee and reading a map spread out before him. According to the waitress, he was in high spirits, chatting about his plans to survey the forest for the next week. But it was late, and the roads back then had no lights, only shadows cast by the dim glow of a lantern. He was warned by several locals to be cautious. Strange things had been reported on those roads, after all. But Samuel only laughed, insisting he'd be fine. Around midnight, Samuel's vehicle was seen heading toward the forested stretch of the road. It was the last anyone would see of him. By dawn, when he didn't show up for work, his colleagues grew concerned and notified the local authorities. A search party was quickly formed, a dozen men combing through the woods and every inch of the road. But there was no sign of Samuel. Days passed with no word, no trace, until finally on the fourth day they found his truck. It was parked just off the road, partially hidden by thick underbrush, as though he had pulled over in a hurry. Inside, the scene was eerie. The keys were still in the ignition, the driver's door slightly ajar. On the passenger seat was his notebook, open to a page scrawled with notes from his journey. But at the bottom, hastily scrawled, was a single sentence that sent chills down their spines. It's here. Watching me, there was no explanation, no context, just those 5 words, written with a hand that seemed to tremble. Search parties scoured the area around the truck, but they found nothing, no footprints, no sign of a struggle, just silence. The trees stood tall, imposing, their branches casting long shadows that seemed to watch, as if holding on to secrets. Days turned into weeks, and still, nothing more was found. Samuel's parents clung to hope, but eventually even they had to accept the bitter reality: their son was gone, swallowed by something unseen, something that left no trace. What makes this disappearance even stranger, though, are the accounts that came afterward. Those who searched for him claimed they heard sounds they couldn't explain, a low whisper carried by the wind, faint and indistinct, almost like someone calling out for help. Several men swore they heard Samuel's voice coming from the woods, crying out, "Help me," but every time they followed the sound, it faded, leading them deeper and deeper and deeper into the trees, only for the silence to swallow them whole again. One man even claimed he saw a shadow flicker between the trees, like a figure watching from afar, before vanishing into the darkness. Samuel's disappearance was soon dismissed as an unfortunate accident, perhaps the result of getting lost in the woods, despite the strange details surrounding it. But those who knew the road, Those who had been close enough to see that haunted expression in his parents' eyes felt there was something more, something that the world would never understand. As the years went by, Samuel's case became the first entry in a growing list of missing persons, the one that started the legend of the cursed highway. The townsfolk began whispering about an entity that haunted the road, an unseen force that claimed anyone who strayed too far into its territory. Stories of a strange light seen flickering through the trees, of figures standing motionless by the roadside at night, only to disappear the moment headlights hit them. It was said that if you saw the light, you should never follow it, for it would lead you into the depths of the forest, where you'd be lost forever. So now the question lingers: what happened to Samuel Wallace that night? Did he encounter something no one was meant to see, or did the road itself draw him in, refusing to let him go? And if you were there, if it were your loved one, what would you do? Would you risk everything to follow the trail of a friend who might already be beyond reach? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if your friend or family member disappeared without a trace on a road like this? This first case leaves an air of dread, a lingering question that has no answer. For the people of this town, it was more than just a mystery. It was the beginning of a curse that would haunt the highway for decades to come, a shadow that seemed to grow darker with each passing year. And as you'll soon discover, Samuel was only the first. The road had claimed him, and it was far from finished. As years passed, Samuel Wallace's disappearance became more than a tragic story whispered among the townsfolk. It became a warning. His parents' grief was only the beginning, the first note in a chilling symphony that would unfold over the decades. And for those who dared to travel the highway alone at night, Samuel's story was a cautionary tale, one that many heeded, yet others, tragically, did not. In 1947, 15 years after Samuel vanished, another disappearance occurred. This time it was a young woman named Margaret Ellis, a schoolteacher on her way to visit family in the next town over. Margaret had taken the route before and knew the road well. That night she left just after sundown, her suitcase packed neatly in the back seat, a gift wrapped and tucked beside her. She was seen last by a local gas station attendant who remembered her smile and friendly wave as she filled her tank. But hours later, her car was discovered in the dead of night, engine idling, lights still on. The suitcase was there, her belongings untouched. The gift sat carefully on the passenger seat, untouched, like a relic of a life interrupted. But Margaret, she was gone, as if swallowed whole by the night. There were no signs of a struggle, no hints of where she might have gone or what she had seen. But there was one detail that haunted everyone involved in the case. Scrawled in lipstick across her rearview mirror were 3 words: "It found me." Her handwriting was jagged, hurried, unlike anything her family recognized. They described Margaret as someone who would never have left without an explanation, a goodbye, yet here she was gone, her final message as enigmatic as the darkness that took her. The police searched relentlessly, combing through miles of forest and questioning anyone who might have seen or heard anything. But like Samuel, Margaret had vanished without a trace, leaving only a deepening shadow over the cursed highway. By the late 1950s, locals began to avoid the road entirely. It became a last resort, used only when there was no other choice. Still, the disappearances continued, every few years like clockwork, each with its own chilling, inexplicable twist. In 1959, a truck driver named Leonard Brooks vanished during a midnight haul. Leonard was known for his reliability, a man who'd driven that route countless times before, without any fear or hesitation. He called his dispatcher at 11:45 p.m., sounding calm, routine. But 15 minutes later, Leonard's voice returned on the line, distorted, panicked. His words, barely audible, spoke of headlights that seemed to appear out of nowhere, blinding him from the other side of the road. "They're coming closer." "Closer," he repeated, the sound crackling with static. His dispatcher, horrified, could do nothing but listen as Leonard's voice grew frantic, until suddenly there was silence. When police arrived at his last known location, they found his truck in the middle of the road, still running, the driver's door flung wide open. On the seat was a crumpled map and a single, chilling clue: a series of handprints on the windshield, smeared across the glass in the faint glow of his headlights. They were too large to be his, their shape unsettling. It was these eerie, unexplainable details that began to form a terrifying pattern, one the town could no longer ignore. These weren't isolated events, random accidents. They were disappearances, connected by the same stretch of road, by the same quiet, chilling stillness, as if the highway itself were a living, breathing entity that demanded sacrifice. The stories accumulated, each adding to the legend of the cursed highway. Maps showed the route, the area marked with warnings, yet people continued to go missing, each story leaving behind remnants of terror, unanswered questions, and a legacy of fear. Another case in 1963 involved a family traveling home from a wedding, a mother, father, and their young daughter. They were only 20 minutes from home when the mother called her sister, mentioning they had taken a wrong turn. The call abruptly cut out, leaving her sister anxiously waiting for their arrival. But they never made it. Days later, a search party found their car parked on the roadside. Their daughter's teddy bear lay in the back seat, and in the trunk, their wedding attire hung neatly, as if ready for another day. But there was one object that haunted the search team, an old pocket watch belonging to the mother, found ticking, even though it had stopped working years ago. The family was never seen again, adding yet another dark thread to the tapestry of terror woven around this cursed place. These incidents became infamous, known to every townsperson, each vanishing like the notes of a dark lullaby, resonating in the silence that followed. Maps of the region bore warnings, small notes scrawled in the margins cautioning travelers to avoid the highway. Police sketches showed the missing faces, hollow-eyed portraits of those taken by the road's unseen force. Over time, these drawings became haunting relics, reminders of lives cut short, swallowed by something far beyond human understanding. So what connects them? What ties together the disappearing schoolteacher, the frantic truck driver, the lost family? Each case shares chilling similarities: abandoned cars, scattered belongings, a lingering, oppressive silence. It's as if the road lures people in, seduces them with its quiet, only to leave behind clues that do nothing but deepen the mystery. And the townspeople know the rules well: never take the road at night, never stop, and above all, never look into the shadows at the roadside. Because, as they'll tell you, something watches from the trees, something patient, waiting for those who dare to cross into its domain. With each disappearance, fear grows, a reminder that this isn't just a road. It's a place that defies reason, a place where the rules of time and space twist, where reality itself bends. What could possibly explain these vanishing acts? An entity hidden in the forest? A doorway to another realm? Or perhaps something even darker, something that demands a price, something that only the road itself understands. So as night falls and the fog blankets the cursed highway once more, the question remains: if you found yourself on this road, if you were lost, alone, with only the darkness for company, would you dare to stop? With every disappearance along the cursed highway, whispers grew louder, theories blossomed like dark flowers in the minds of the townsfolk. At first they were just idle talk, rumors that might have been laughed off if not for the mounting evidence: lives lost, cars abandoned, clues that pointed to something unnatural. People began asking questions that no one seemed able to answer. How could so many vanish without a trace? What invisible hand was guiding these events? And why this highway? Some believe the answer lies deep in the land itself. They say the highway was built over ancient, sacred grounds, a place marked by rituals and rites that go back centuries. The theory goes that the road disrupted something buried beneath something that was never meant to be disturbed. Local legends tell of strange symbols found etched into old stones along the forest's edge, hidden beneath the soil, symbols that seem to predate any known civilization. Stories of hunters and loggers passing through the forest long before the road was built, men who saw shapes moving in the mist, heard voices calling their names. They claimed the land itself was cursed, marked by spirits seeking revenge on those who trespass. Others speak of entities lurking within the shadows, figures that some have reportedly glimpsed, but never long enough to fully see. One recurring description haunts the stories of a tall, slender figure cloaked in darkness, eyes like faint embers, a presence that seems to watch from the tree line. A few who claim to have seen it describe a terrible feeling, a chill that freezes the blood, an urge to run but nowhere to go. According to these accounts, this entity is ancient, a guardian of the forest who punishes those who wander too close, an otherworldly warden who traps souls along the road to serve as eternal company. They say that those who disappear don't truly vanish, they're simply trapped between worlds, drawn into the figure's realm, forced to wander the fog forever. And then, there's the tale of the wanderers. Local lore says that, on certain nights, if you look closely at the edges of the road, you might see them, the ghostly apparitions of past travelers, flickering like distant shadows, eyes hollow and mouths frozen mid-scream. These are the souls of those who never escaped, bound to the road, cursed to repeat their last moments, trapped between life and death. Some drivers claim that these wandering spirits appear suddenly in their headlights, causing them to swerve in panic, only to find nothing there. And perhaps, in those heart-stopping moments, they've caught a glimpse of those who lost their way, forever bound to the highway. Other theories take a darker turn, whispering of cult activities hidden deep within the forest. According to some, a secret society is said to have worshipped entities of the otherworld here, performing rituals to summon and appease dark forces. Old-timers speak of strange gatherings heard deep in the woods, of distant chants and fires that burn through the night. These cult members, they say, made a pact with something beyond our understanding, offering travelers as sacrifices in exchange for power and protection. The disappearances, then, would be part of this sinister ritual of binding that keeps these forces contained, but hungry. Every few years, another soul would be taken, appeasing whatever dark entity waits beneath the surface. There's yet another theory, one that dives into a more earthly explanation that the disappearances are no supernatural mystery, but part of a government cover-up. Some believe the highway cuts through restricted land, a place where secret experiments were conducted years ago, tests that left scars on the land itself. Those who support this theory point to old military records hinting at strange incidents in the area. They say the government knows more than they let on, that the disappearances are a convenient way to hide the truth, whether it be dangerous chemical leaks, radiation, or something far darker. There are even tales of government agents patrolling the area, though sightings are rare, as if they move only under the cover of night. Some locals claim to have seen strange lights hovering over the forest, silent black helicopters that seem to appear from nowhere, leaving as quickly as they came. Among the more otherworldly theories, some believe the road is a portal, a thin line between our world and another dimension. The cursed highway, in this view, acts as a bridge between realms, a place where reality itself is thin, fragile. Those who travel it risk slipping through, caught in a momentary lapse of time and space, never to return. There are stories of travelers who claim that they saw strange landscapes through the fog, glimpses of otherworldly scenes through their car windows, but as soon as they looked again, it was gone. They say that for a split second, they felt as if they were somewhere else, a place where nothing was familiar, where the laws of nature no longer applied. As with any dark mystery, the legends and theories have woven themselves into the town's culture, creating an atmosphere heavy with fear and fascination. Children are warned not to go near the forest, travelers are told to avoid the highway at night, and the elderly shake their heads at those foolish enough to ignore the rules. To them, the road is a place of strange power, a thin line where the known world meets the unknown. And they speak of it in hushed tones, as if even mentioning it might draw its attention. But the question remains, what do you believe? Could it be an ancient curse, an angry spirit, a government cover-up, or something beyond any of these theories? Could it be all of them, or none? Could there be forces at work on this highway that defy explanation, that lie beyond our understanding? What would you do if faced with the unknown? If you found yourself driving down a quiet road at night, alone, with only your headlights piercing the darkness, would you feel safe? Have you ever heard of a road like this, a place so cursed that no one dares speak its name? Share your own stories in the comments. Perhaps your hometown holds its own mysteries, its own hauntings. Or perhaps you've traveled this highway yourself and know firsthand the fear that comes when you realize you are not alone. The road's shadow continues to grow, filled with legends and theories, each adding another layer to the horror. With every tale shared, every mystery unsolved, the cursed highway's reputation solidifies, drawing the curious, the brave, and the foolhardy to test their courage, or perhaps to meet their fate. The truth remains hidden, perhaps forever, behind the fog, the darkness, and the echo of footsteps that never seem to end. Over the years, a handful of people have claimed they managed to escape the highway's sinister pull, survivors who speak in hushed, haunted tones of what they encountered. Each story is different in the details, but they all share one thing in common: a terror that lingers, a fear that even time cannot erase. These aren't just tales of bad luck or coincidence, they are warnings, whispered by those who have seen what hides in the shadows along the cursed road. One of the most unsettling accounts comes from Jacob Fletcher, a retired truck driver who made the unfortunate decision to take the highway late one night in 1987. Jacob, an experienced driver with thousands of miles behind him, was no stranger to the road. But that night, as he recalls, was unlike any other. His voice shakes even now when he tells the story, as if reliving each terrifying moment. Jacob remembers the silence first. It wasn't an ordinary quiet, but an oppressive, unnatural absence of sound, as though the very air had grown heavy. His radio, usually a comforting hum of static and old tunes, cut out abruptly, leaving him alone with the hum of the engine. The road stretched endlessly ahead, and a thick fog began to close in, swallowing the trees and cloaking the headlights. He slowed down, cautiously peering into the mist, trying to shake off the eerie feeling creeping over him. But then, as he looked ahead, he saw them figures, shadowy and still, standing at the edge of the road, their faces turned toward him. He describes them as more like shadows than people, tall and gaunt, without discernible features, as if made from the darkness itself. They didn't move, they simply stood there, watching, their eyes hollow pits that seemed to draw in the light. Jacob's heart pounded, and he gripped the wheel tightly, feeling an overwhelming urge to turn back. But he pushed on, hoping they were just a trick of the fog. Then, as he passed, he felt something ice-cold brush against his arm, as if an unseen hand had reached through the window and grazed his skin. His blood ran cold, and he glanced in the rearview mirror. The figures had vanished. What Jacob didn't know was that his ordeal had only just begun. Minutes later, he heard something faint, something almost human. It was the sound of whispers, voices muttering his name, echoing in the cab of his truck. He turned the radio dials frantically, but the static remained, broken only by the faint, disembodied murmurs growing louder, more desperate. He swears he heard someone say, "Help me, please," before a low, guttural voice cut through the whispers, telling him to leave. The voice was neither male nor female, an otherworldly tone that made his skin crawl. That was enough. Jacob floored the gas, speeding down the road, the voices fading but the fear lingering long after he left the highway. He never drove that road again, and to this day he avoids it, haunted by the memory of the silent watchers and the cold touch that seemed all too real. Another survivor, Emily Peterson, was only 17 when she encountered the horrors of the highway one autumn night in 1993. She and her friends were driving back from a late-night movie, laughter and music filling the car as they took a shortcut through the highway. But as they reached the road's midpoint, something changed. Emily recalls that the air suddenly grew cold, the laughter dying as they noticed the fog creeping in, swallowing the beams of their headlights. Then came the first of many strange sights: a figure, small and childlike, standing in the center of the road. They thought it was a lost child and pulled over. But as Emily opened the door, she was overcome with a feeling of intense dread. She looked at the figure again, her eyes widening as she realized it had no face, just a blank, featureless head tilted slightly as if studying her. Panicking, she screamed for her friends to drive, and they sped off, hearts pounding, desperate to escape. But the nightmare wasn't over. As they drove, they felt something was wrong. The road seemed to twist, leading them in circles, past landmarks that shouldn't have been there. The fog thickened, and shadows moved along the edges of their vision, shapes that disappeared the moment they tried to focus on them. Emily remembers hearing a strange noise, almost like breathing, coming from all around them. Her friend in the passenger seat swore she saw a handprint appear on the fogged-up window, a hand that seemed to press harder until the glass began to creak. They drove on, the car feeling as if it was moving slower, almost as if the road itself were holding them back. And then, without warning, the engine died. The silence was overwhelming, broken only by the frantic breaths of her friends, each one looking around, paralyzed by fear. Then they heard it. A low, distant chant coming from the forest, voices rising in a haunting, rhythmic pattern. Emily closed her eyes, gripping her friend's hand as they sat, helpless, waiting. Just as suddenly as it had stopped, the car roared back to life, and they sped off, barely able to keep control on the twisting road. When they finally made it to town, they sat in silence, each one forever changed, haunted by the memory of that faceless child and the voices that called to them from the darkness. And there's Sam Torres, a park ranger who patrolled the area for over a decade. One late winter evening, he received a distress call from a young woman claiming her car had broken down on the highway. Sam, experienced and level-headed, arrived on the scene to find the car deserted, its headlights casting long shadows across the mist. He walked around, calling out, shining his flashlight into the trees. But there was nothing, only the echo of his own voice. But as he reached the edge of the road, he noticed something that made him stop cold, a line of footprints leading into the woods. He followed them cautiously, his breath visible in the cold night air. And after only a few steps, he saw a figure, standing motionless among the trees. Sam describes the figure as tall, draped in dark clothes, its head tilted as if listening. He called out, but it remained silent, unmoving. He took a step closer, only to see its face that seemed hollow, eyes black as coal, a mouth frozen in a chilling, silent scream. And then, it began to move toward him, slowly, with a dreadful, unnatural gait. Sam backed away, heart pounding. But as he turned, he noticed more figures emerging from the mist, surrounding him, their blank eyes fixed on him. He ran back to his vehicle, jumping inside and locking the doors. But when he looked up, the figures were gone, leaving only the eerie silence of the foggy road. The young woman he had come to rescue was never found, her car the only remnant of her existence, yet another haunting reminder of the curse that seemed to grip the highway. Sam left his post not long after, his nights plagued by the memory of those hollow eyes, convinced that whatever haunted that road was not of this world. These survivor stories give us a glimpse into the horrors that lurk in the shadows along this highway. Their accounts may differ in detail, but each shares an unmistakable sense of dread, a fear that goes beyond the rational, beyond what we know. They are haunted, each one left with scars invisible to the naked eye, scars that bind them forever to the cursed highway. So as you listen to their tales, ask yourself, what would you do if you were on that road, faced with the unknown, surrounded by silence and shadows that watch you from the darkness? Would you keep driving? Or would the road claim you too? As stories of the cursed highway grew, it wasn't just the locals who shuddered at its mention. Paranormal investigators, skeptics, and researchers began to take notice, each intrigued by the mysteries whispered along this lonely stretch of road. Some were drawn by the thrill of the unknown, others sought answers, hoping to disprove the legends. Yet, as many have learned, the highway is not a place to be taken lightly. Every investigation, no matter how meticulously planned, left behind more questions than answers, and more than a few investigators with memories that would haunt them for a lifetime. The first documented investigation took place in the late 1970s, led by a small team of researchers from a nearby university's paranormal studies department. Skeptics at heart, they set out with cameras, temperature sensors, and recording devices, determined to debunk the supernatural tales and reveal the highway for what they assumed it to be, an overgrown stretch of asphalt, twisted by folklore and myth. They stationed themselves at one of the highway's most notorious spots, where multiple disappearances had taken place. They set up cameras along the roadside, pointed toward the mist-shrouded trees, and waited. At first, there was nothing. Hours passed, and the road lay silent, blanketed by darkness, the air heavy and still. Then, sometime after midnight, their equipment began to malfunction. The temperature sensors dropped abruptly, plunging to near freezing in the span of a minute, even though it was the height of summer. One of the researchers checked the sensor, frowning, but as he stood there, a chill crept down his spine. He turned, certain he felt someone watching him from the tree line. But when he looked, he saw nothing, only shadows, unmoving, dark as ink. Their recording devices, too, began to pick up something strange. Hours of silence broken by faint sounds, whispers that seemed to float through the air. When they reviewed the footage the next day, they were horrified by what they heard. The whispers, at first faint and garbled, became clearer with each playthrough. A voice, low and trembling, repeated a chilling message, come closer, it's waiting." The voice trailed off into silence, but it left an eerie feeling, as though something had indeed been waiting just beyond the edge of their camera's reach. And then, just before the recording cut off, a final whisper came through, one that each investigator swore was addressed to them by name. Word of this investigation spread, attracting others to the cursed highway, including a well-known paranormal investigator named Dr. Helen Graves in the early 1990s. Dr. Graves was renowned for her methodical approach, her belief that every mystery had a scientific explanation. Armed with high-tech equipment, she set up along the highway with a team of experts, determined to uncover what lay behind the stories. They worked through the night, recording temperature fluctuations, setting up motion detectors, and using infrared cameras to capture anything out of the ordinary. Within hours, their equipment was ablaze with activity. The motion detectors went off sporadically, yet there was nothing in sight, no animals, no wind, only silence. The temperature readings plummeted in random patches along the road, as if cold spots appeared and vanished, like breath on a winter night. Her infrared cameras picked up a strange, shifting mist that seemed to move of its own accord, darting in and out of the frame. But it was the sounds, once again, that left her shaken. Among the usual hum of night, they captured something else, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming on glass. It grew louder and louder, until it sounded almost like footsteps, moving closer and closer, then stopping suddenly. Dr. Graves reported hearing a whisper herself, a voice that said, "You're not welcome here," a voice she would later describe as neither male nor female, as if it belonged to something beyond human understanding. Dr. Graves abandoned the investigation that night, leaving the road in a hurry, and to this day she refuses to speak of what she encountered. Other groups followed, each one bringing their own theories, their own beliefs, hoping to make sense of the unknown. Some of the more daring investigators even ventured into the woods at the highway's edge, though none stayed for long. One team in the early 2000s was reported to have vanished briefly from their group's communication system, disconnected for nearly an hour without explanation. When they finally reappeared, they were found wandering along the highway, disoriented, unable to explain where they had been or what they had seen. Each one claimed to have heard voices, laughter even, a child's giggle echoing from somewhere within the mist. One man from that team years later would recall seeing shadows darting between the trees, eyes that glowed faintly, watching him. He said he still hears the laughter at night, a sound that follows him, even in his dreams. One of the more recent investigations took place in 2015, conducted by a popular paranormal investigation show. Armed with state-of-the-art equipment, the team set up for an overnight stay, hoping to capture irrefutable evidence of the highway's curse. They set up cameras, recording equipment, electromagnetic field meters, and even a drone to capture aerial footage of the fog-covered road. They, too, experienced the sudden temperature drops, the unexplained cold spots that formed around them. But it was the audio recordings that would prove to be the most disturbing evidence they collected. At precisely 3:13 a.m., their equipment picked up a series of sounds that have yet to be explained. The first was a low humming, almost like a song, coming from the direction of the forest. It grew louder, more rhythmic, like chanting, then faded, leaving an eerie silence. Moments later, a voice was picked up on the recording, a child's voice, saying, "Can you see me?" The voice was faint, like a whisper carried on the wind, but it was undeniably there, chilling and innocent. The investigators played the recording back multiple times, each one left visibly disturbed, struggling to understand what they had just heard. But the strangest evidence captured that night came from the drone footage. As it flew above the highway, the drone's camera picked up something strange, a faint light moving along the road, almost as if someone were walking with a lantern, weaving in and out of the fog. The team on the ground saw nothing, heard nothing, yet on the screen, the light continued its slow, purposeful path along the highway before vanishing altogether. To this day, no one has been able to explain the source of the light, nor has anyone been able to reproduce it. Over the years, dozens of investigators have set up cameras, sensors, and recording devices, only to hear chilling whispers or see strange shadows on playback. Some have walked away with footage, recordings, bits of evidence that suggest something is indeed there, lurking beyond what the eye can see. Yet, despite all the high-tech equipment, Despite the countless hours spent on that cursed road, no definitive answer has ever been found. The highway remains an enigma, a place where reality twists and shadows seem to take on lives of their own. What is it about this road that defies explanation? Is it a gateway to another realm, a place where the dead walk among the living? Or is it something far darker, something that we as humans are not meant to understand? The investigators leave with more questions than answers, each one haunted by their experience, each one left with the sense that whatever haunts the highway cannot be captured or contained. So what do you think? Could science ever explain the strange happenings along the cursed highway? Or is there something beyond our understanding that lingers there, waiting for those who dare to cross its path? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you ever find yourself on that road, remember, the cameras may not see it, but something is always watching. Each investigation adds a chilling layer to the mystery, turning the highway into something more than just a road. It becomes a place where shadows speak, where science falters, and where those who seek answers risk losing themselves to the darkness. And then we come to the case that changed everything: the ultimate disappearance, the incident that left not only locals but authorities, investigators, and even seasoned skeptics completely baffled. It's a story that has haunted this region, a disappearance so harrowing that even those who avoid superstitions can't shake the chill it brings. This case is known simply as the Night of the Strangers, a disappearance that took place just a few years ago, and one that left behind only fragments, eerie clues that defy any explanation. It happened on a cold October night in 2018. A group of 4 friends, Alex, Lila, Derek, and Mia, were taking a weekend trip to a cabin near the forest, a popular area where locals often went for hiking and bonfires. They had taken the highway, aware of its reputation but laughing it off, convinced the stories were just that, stories. They had planned this trip for months, excited for a night of stargazing, stories around the fire, and escape from the city. But as they drove down the highway that evening, the fog thickened, wrapping around them like a heavy shroud, cutting off all sight beyond the headlights. Their last known call was to Alex's brother at around 11:30 p.m., a casual check-in to say they were on their way. Everything sounded fine. There was laughter in the background, the voices of friends enjoying the drive. But when they didn't show up the next morning, concern turned into dread. Calls to their phones went unanswered, and by midday, a search party was formed, scouring the highway and surrounding forest for any sign of them. What they found, however, was far more disturbing than anyone could have anticipated. The car was discovered parked on the side of the road, exactly halfway down the highway, shrouded in an unnatural stillness. The doors were all unlocked, but there was no sign of the friends. Inside, the car was eerie, frozen in time, Mia's jacket draped over the back seat, an empty thermos lying on the floor, Derek's phone still plugged into the charger. But what haunted the searchers the most were the footprints. A set of footprints led from each side of the car, winding off into the forest in different directions, each person appearing to have walked alone. But the prints were strange. Each set veered erratically, as if they had wandered aimlessly, or worse, as if they were being led. As the search team followed the trails, they quickly noticed something even more chilling. Each set of footprints would eventually stop, just vanish, as if the earth had swallowed them whole. There were no signs of struggle, no signs that the ground had disturbed them, no indication that the friends had even turned back. It was as if each one had simply disappeared. The investigators, now deeply disturbed, searched the car for more clues. That's when they found it, an old, worn journal tucked under the passenger seat. It wasn't any of the friends' belongings. It was aged, covered in dust, the pages yellowed and fragile. Inside were scribbled notes, drawings of the highway, sketches of shadowy figures with hollow eyes, and a series of warnings: stay on the road. Don't listen to the voices. Don't follow the lights. One line was repeated over and over, scrawled with increasing urgency: the highway takes what it wants. The last entry, scrawled hurriedly, said, we hear it calling. We're leaving now. It's watching. Hours turned into days, and despite relentless efforts, no further traces of the 4 friends were ever found. The only sign of them remained in the vehicle, a car full of belongings left untouched, eerily ordinary, as though they might return at any moment. But they never did. Their families, distraught and desperate for answers, organized vigils and brought in private investigators, but no one could make sense of the clues left behind. Authorities closed the case, deeming it an unsolved disappearance, but locals were not so easily convinced. They spoke of the friends being claimed by the highway, the latest in a long line of offerings, their souls lost to whatever force haunts that road. Over the months that followed, rumors spread. Travelers along the highway at night reported hearing faint voices calling out from the forest, laughter that sounded oddly familiar, and in the distance, the ghostly flicker of flashlights, as if four friends were still wandering through the mist, trying to find their way back. One man even claimed to have seen a figure that resembled Leela standing on the side of the road, her face pale, eyes hollow, her hand raised in a silent wave before vanishing into the fog. The story of Alex, Lila, Derek, and Mia has since become the most chilling tale associated with the cursed highway, a reminder to all who travel it that some roads aren't meant to be taken. Their disappearance isn't just another entry in the list. It's a symbol, a warning that the road's hunger is real, and that it is patient. And with each passing year, those who remember the friends say they feel the highway waiting, that it's not satisfied, that it's always looking for more. So, as the fog rolls in and the darkness blankets the highway once more, their memory lingers, a question that has no answer. What happened to them? Did they simply vanish into another realm? Or were they pulled into something darker, something that waits for those who stray too far? The mystery remains, and for those who dare to drive the cursed highway, a single thought prevails: if it took them, who will be next? The case of the Night of the Strangers stands as a haunting reminder that some mysteries were never meant to be solved, that some roads lead only into darkness, and that for those who travel this path, the highway is always watching, waiting to claim its next soul. Just when everyone thought the terror of the cursed highway had reached its peak, something happened, something that left even the most hardened skeptics questioning everything they thought they knew. After the disappearance of Alex, Lila, Derek, and Mia, the road remained quiet for a time, as though it were satisfied, sated, but the silence was merely a lull before the darkness would return. This most recent event took place barely a month ago, long after sunset on an icy November night. A lone motorcyclist, Jeremy Carter, was riding home after a long shift. He was familiar with the highway's reputation, but he'd traveled it many times before, dismissing the stories as nothing more than superstitions. Yet that night he felt something different, a tension in the air, an almost tangible weight pressing down on him. Still, he shook it off and pressed on, the road empty, his headlights cutting through the thickening fog. But then, as he rounded a sharp curve, his bike suddenly sputtered and stalled. Jeremy swore in frustration, pulling over to the shoulder to inspect his engine, certain it was a simple mechanical issue. But as he dismounted and reached for his phone, he noticed a strange, quiet sound like whispering, but faint, as if it were coming from the trees, hidden just out of sight. He looked around, heart pounding, but saw nothing. Only fog and shadows stretched out in every direction. As he waited for the tow truck, the whispers grew louder, but still indistinct, as though dozens of voices were murmuring in a language he couldn't understand. And then he noticed something chilling. The fog seemed to thicken, swirling and moving against the breeze, as if it had a mind of its own. In the mist, shapes began to form, figures, human-like but not quite right, their bodies blurry, their eyes dark and hollow. Jeremy swears he saw faces, familiar faces, faces that looked like the photos he'd seen in news reports, faces that matched those of the four friends who had vanished the year before. Panicking, he stumbled back, gripping his phone, heart racing as he dialed the tow company again, begging them to hurry. But in that moment his phone screen flickered, the battery inexplicably draining to zero before shutting off completely. He tried to restart it, his hands shaking, but the screen stayed dark, leaving him alone with the figures growing clearer, their faces turning slowly toward him. And then, just as suddenly as they'd appeared, they were gone. The fog cleared, the shapes faded, and the road was empty once more. When the tow truck finally arrived, Jeremy was pale and shaken, barely able to describe what he'd seen. The driver, a local who had heard the stories, simply shook his head, eyes wide with understanding. "You're lucky," he said. "Not everyone gets away from this road." Since that night, Jeremy hasn't been the same. His family and friends say he's become withdrawn, haunted by what he encountered on the highway, as if he's still looking over his shoulder, waiting for the road to come calling again. And the town is once again gripped with fear, whispers of the highway's curse filling every corner, each story darker than the last. Just when everyone thought it was safe to travel this road again, a new case appeared, a new warning that the curse endures, and that no one is truly safe. So, where does it end? Will this highway ever reveal its secrets? Or is it destined to forever trap those who dare to cross its path, taking them one by one into its dark embrace? The truth remains hidden, buried in the fog, waiting for the next soul to wander too far. As the legend of the cursed highway grows, one thing is certain: its hunger is unending, its mystery unsolved. And for those who find themselves alone on this dark stretch of road, remember this: you may hear whispers, you may see shadows, but whatever you do, don't stop. Because out here in the darkness, the highway waits, and it never stops watching. Will the mystery of the cursed highway ever be solved? Or is it destined to remain one of the most chilling enigmas of our time? Join us next time as we dive deeper into the world of the unexplained, exploring tales that defy logic and chill the soul. If you're brave enough, subscribe to our channel and stay with us, because the truth is out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. This chilling final scene fades into darkness, the fog rolling over the screen, leaving the viewer with a lingering sense of dread, a feeling that the highway's story is far from over. The shadowy figures and eerie whispers echo in the silence, a reminder that some roads should never be traveled alone. Now that you've heard the stories, the disappearances, the chilling encounters, the investigators who dared to search for answers, one question remains. What do you think? Is this cursed highway just a legend passed down through whispers and campfire tales? Or is there something darker lurking along its fog-covered path, waiting for those who wander too close? Are these stories the product of overactive imaginations? Or is there a curse so ancient and powerful that no one truly escapes? Some say it's merely folklore, a collection of coincidences woven together to create a modern-day ghost story. But then, what about the survivors? What about the voices on the recordings, the cold spots, the shadows seen just at the edge of vision, and the faces, familiar, yet hollow, haunting the fog like specters of those who came before? Could these be mere tricks of the mind or something more? Could it be that those who disappear are not truly lost but instead bound to the road forever, cursed to wander endlessly, part of an eternal cycle of dread? Maybe you're a skeptic, someone who sees a logical explanation behind every strange occurrence. Or maybe, like many who live nearby, you believe that some mysteries were never meant to be solved, that some forces are best left undisturbed. Whatever you believe, the highway's legend endures, haunting every corner of the small town, a dark mark on an otherwise ordinary map. And even now, as the fog settles over the road once again, it seems to wait, shrouded in shadow, an invitation to the curious and the brave to seek it out. What would you do if you found yourself on this highway? Would you keep going, ignoring the shadows and whispers? Or would you, like so many before, fall victim to its pull, vanishing into the mist, your story joining the others as a chilling chapter of the cursed highway? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Share your theories, your beliefs, and your own stories of haunted places. After all, the road isn't the only place with secrets. Have you ever felt the eerie sensation of being watched, heard whispers that shouldn't exist, or seen shadows that defy explanation? We want to hear your tales, your thoughts, your theories on the dark corners of the world that remain beyond understanding. And if you're drawn to mysteries that chill the spine and tales that make you question what lies beyond, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Turn on notifications so you won't miss our next journey into the unknown, where we delve even deeper into haunted places, forgotten legends, and unsolved disappearances. Because the truth is out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to seek it. As the fog lifts, as the road quiets, one thing is clear: some mysteries will forever remain shrouded in darkness. And as long as there are those willing to seek answers, the cursed highway and places like it will continue to beckon, waiting patiently for the next soul to answer its call. Will you be next? Until our next journey into the unknown, stay safe and remember, some roads are best left untraveled.